question, S. Craddock. So the trial balance of S. Craddock, a furniture and carpet trader. So it's very important to know what type of business S. Craddock is involved in. So a furniture and carpet trader, I would highlight that or make a note of that somewhere, was entered in a suspense account and the following balance sheet was prepared. So on checking the books, the following errors were discovered. So number 1, furniture purchased on credit from J. Dolan for 16,500 had been entered as 6,500 on the incorrect side of Dolan's account and credited as 1,650 in the fixtures and fittings account. A debtor who owed Craddock €900 sent a cheque for €750 and €100 in cash in full settlement. This was entered correctly in the books. However, no entry had been made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. Number 3. Bedside lockers previously sold on credit for €340 had been returned to Craddock. These goods had been incorrectly entered as €34 on the credit of the fixtures and fittings account and as €40 on the debit of the purchases account. Number 4. A private debt for 1,600 owed by Craddock had been offset in full against a business debt of €1,700 owed to the firm for carpet repairs previously carried out. No entry had been made in the books in respect of this offset. And then number 5, Craddock had returned furniture previously purchased on credit from a supplier for 8,800 and had entered this transaction in the relevant ledger accounts incorrectly as €8,880. However, a credit note subsequently arrived from the supplier in respect of the return, showing a transport charge of €200 to cover the cost of the return. The only entry made in respect of this credit note was a credit of 8,600 in the creditor's account. Okay, so first things first, part A, journalise the necessary corrections, and this is where the majority of our marks are going to be received here. Okay, so what I would suggest that we do, as always, get your red and green pen out and underline what should have happened in green and what happened by mistake, what was recorded by mistake in red. So it should look something like that. So we'll go through each one in detail now individually. So the first one, furniture purchased on credit from J. Dolan for 16,500 had been entered as 6,500 on the incorrect side of Dolan's account and credited as €1,650 in the fixtures and fittings account. So remember that Craddock is a furniture retailer. Okay, so what should have happened? So furniture purchased on credit. So furniture there would be purchases because that's what Craddock sells. So we debit the purchases account because purchases is an expense account, 16,500. And the creditor account, we credit that 16,500 there. Okay, so that's what should have happened. Now, what happened by mistake? It had been entered as 6,500 on the incorrect side of Dolan's account and credited as 1,650 in the fixtures and fittings account. So it was incorrectly entered, wrong side of Dolan's account as 6,500, so 6,500 there in the creditor account, and then credited as 1,650 in the fixtures and fittings account, so that's 1,650 there. Okay, how will we fix this then? So we're going to enter the purchases first of all, so the 16,500 goes straight in there. To fix the creditor account, we want to put in 16,500 to the debit side. That's what we want. But what we had was 6,500 on the debit side. So we want the credit side 16,500. So what we need to do is cancel this out by putting 6,500 on the credit side and then add the original 16,500 that we should have put in. What you're going to have then overall is €23,000 on the credit side of the creditor account. Then we're going to fix the fixtures and fittings account. Okay, so what we're going to do is just put 1,650 on the debit side of that to cancel out this mistake here. And then what we do is we check and see if our debits and credits equal, and they don't at the moment. So what we have to do then is do a suspense account. So we're going to debit the suspense account €4,850. So that's your workings done, and we'll throw them now into our part A to journalise the necessary corrections. So we have purchases 16,500 on the debit side, creditor 23,000 on the credit side, Fixtures and fittings, 1,650 on the debit side, and suspense account, 4,850 on the debit side. And that is being the correction of incorrect recording of the purchase of furniture on credit. Okay, part 2 then. A debtor who owed Craddock €900 sent a cheque for €750 and €100 in cash in full settlement. This was recorded correctly in the books. However, no entry had been made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or of the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. So the first sentence, we do not have to record that because, as you can see, it says this was correctly recorded in the books. So if we put this into the books again, we'd be the ones making the mistake, okay? So no entry had been made in the books of what? So the error was that no entry was made in the books of the subsequent dishonouring of this cheque or the writing off of the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk to you about the dishonouring of the cheque. So let's have a look. What would have happened to the cheque? So when we record the cheque coming in, we put $750 here, money coming into the bank. However, we're going to record the dishonouring of the cheque, so $850 is going to go on the credit side of the bank account. Okay. Now, who had previously given us the cheque? It was the debtor. All right. Now, the debtor had owed us $900, but they sent us a cheque for $750, and we received the $100 in cash from them. So they don't owe us that $100 again. All right, what's the difference between the 900 and the 100? It's 800. So we obviously give them a discount of €50 there. All right, so what we're going to do in the accounts is say, wait a minute, the cheque was dishonoured, so our debtor owes us €800 again. Okay, so it's the whole amount of the cheque plus they're going to owe us the discount again, right? We're only giving them a discount because they paid us the cheque. So the debtor, we debit the debtor 800 there. And then we unwind the discount that we had allowed. So discount allowed when we received the cheque would have been on the debit side, but now we're going to unwind that and put it on the credit side here. So that is recording of the dishonoured cheque. All right. Now what we have to do is write off the remaining debt in full because of bankruptcy. So we're not going to receive, see this 800 that we've just after increasing the debtor account of because of the dishonoured cheque, we're not going to receive that 800. That debtor has gone bankrupt. So we have to credit the debtor account. So we're crediting the debtor account because the asset is reducing because the debtor is never going to be able to pay us there. So €800 onto the credit side. And then we're also going to record that as bad debts then on the debit side. So €800 goes into the bad debts on the debit side. What happened by mistake was that nothing was entered at all. Okay, and how will I fix this? I'm just going to enter all of those original items there. So throwing that into our part A, we have the bank, $750 on the credit side. We have two amounts into the debtor account, so we have to show both of these. We don't just put nothing in the debtor account. We have to show both of these because two things happened here to the debtor account, so we need to show them. Discount, credit side, 50. So that is unwinding the discount allowed. And the bad debts expense is increased there by €800. So being recording of dishonouring a cheque and recording of a bad debt could be our narration there. So again, our narrations are just mentioning something from the question. All right, number 3. Bedside lockers previously sold on credit for €340 had been returned to Craddock. These goods had been incorrectly entered as €34 on the credit of the fixtures and fittings account and as €40 on the debit of the purchases account. Okay, so let's record what should have happened first. So bedside lockers previously sold on credit for €340 had been returned to Craddock. So bedside lockers, remember that Craddock is a furniture retailer, so they were previously sold on credit. So this is sales returns and it is debtor. So we're recording them on the opposite side as when we record them as a sale. When we record as a sale, the revenue sales increases. Put that on the credit side of the sales account, and we record the increase of the debtor because they owe us money. So we're going to unwind that by putting $340 on the debit side of the sales returns and $340 on the credit side of the sales. So that's what should have happened. So let's look at the mistake then. These goods have been incorrectly entered as 34 on the credit of the fixtures and fittings account, okay, so the credit of the fixtures and fittings account, and as €40 on the debit of the purchases account. So that's what happened by mistake. So how are we going to fix this? Well, these haven't been entered at all, so we're going to put them in. To correct these, we are going to record them on the opposite side to cancel them out because we didn't need to put them there at all. So you've got €34 on the debit side of the fixtures and fittings and €40 on the credit side of the purchases. And then my debits and credits do not equal, so I have to create a suspense account. And the difference between the debit and credit is €6 there on the debit side. So that is number 3 done. Entering number 3 then, we just simply put the figures under the debit or credit column wherever we need to do it. And remember, we have a narration to write and it just has to relate to the question in some way or the error in some way. So being recording of dishonouring a cheque and recording of a bad debt. Number 4, a private debt for $1,600 owed by Craddock had been offset in full against a business debt of $1,700 owed to the firm for carpet repairs previously carried out. No entry had been made in the books in respect of this offset. Okay, so a private debt for $1,600 owed by Craddock had been offset in full against a business debt of $1,700 owed to the firm for carpet repairs previously carried out. All right, so private debt for 1600 owed by Craddock. So Craddock himself or herself, we don't know if it's him or her, owed that personally. Okay, they owed personally a private debt of €1,600, but that had been offset in full against a business debt of $1,700 owed to Craddock's business. So Craddock owed somebody who owed Craddock's business money. So the debt was offset against each other. So therefore, Craddock took something from the business. So Craddock's private debt for $1,600 that he owed somebody, he didn't go into his own pocket and take out that money and pay the person. So the business took the hit on that because somebody owed the business $1,700. So the business took the hit there. So we're going to debit the drawings account. So drawings is when a sole trader takes stuff from the business. Debit the drawings account, $1,600. We credit the debtor account, $1,700. And then the discount account, we debited €100 there. What happened by mistake? Nothing happened at all. So we're going to enter that into the accounts there. So into our part A, we debit the drawing $1,600, we credit the debtor $1,700, and we debit the discount €100. So our narration there could be being recording of an offset of a private debt owed by Craddock against a debt owed by a customer to the firm. So obviously your narration can be anything as long as it mentions aspects of the error. Okay. Right, moving on then, part 5. So Craddock had returned furniture previously purchased on credit from a supplier for €8,800 and had entered this transaction in the relevant ledger accounts incorrectly as €8,880. However, a credit note subsequently arrived from the supplier in respect of the return showing a transport charge of €200 to cover the cost of the return. The only entry made in respect of this credit note was a credit of $8,600 in the creditor's account. Alright, so let's get started, and first of all we'll look at the first green sentence here. So Craddock had returned furniture. Remember, Craddock sells furniture, so that is purchase returns, previously purchased on credit from a supplier for $8,800. So $8,800 goes in the credit side of the purchase account. So when we purchase, we debit. When we return purchases, we credit. And the creditor is a liability. When it increases, we credit. When it decreases, we debit. So that reduces our debt to the creditor. So 8,800 entered in those accounts there. And then the second green sentence, however, a credit note subsequently arrived from the supplier in respect of the return, showing a transport charge of €200 to cover the cost of the return. So we're going to put €200 on the opposite sides of where we've just recorded the return. So overall, in our purchase account credit side, we have €8,600 on the credit side of the purchase account, and we have €8,600 on the debit side of the creditor account. Now that's what should have happened. Okay, so now we're going to do what happened by mistake. So the first sentence there, had entered this transaction in the relevant ledger accounts incorrectly as 8,880. So the purchase returns to the creditor 8,880 instead of the 8,800. Okay, so 8880 and 8880. Now it didn't say that it was put into the wrong accounts or the wrong sides, so it's the correct accounts, correct sides, but just the wrong amount there. The last sentence, the only entry made in respect of this credit note was a credit of 8,600 in the creditor's account. So 8,600 in the creditor's account here, 8,600. So when I balance that out, my debit side is bigger and it's €280 bigger, so €280 here. Okay, how will I fix this? So my purchases account, all right, I want to have 8,600 on the credit side, but what I have is 8,880. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do there is debit the purchases account €280. My creditor account, I want €8,600 on the debit side, but what I have is €280. So what I have then to do is put another €8,320 on the debit side, so that I get up to my €8,600. You'll see there your debits and credits do not equal, so what you have to do is create your suspense account. So into your suspense account you are going to credit €8,600 there. So that's the last one that you have to do and the last one that you have to put into your part A. So debit the purchase account €280, debit the creditor account €8,320 and credit the suspense account €8,600. And your narration there could be being the correction of incorrect recording of a credit note and recording of a charge for returns. Okay, so that is part A complete, and as we said, that was the majority of your marks. That was 55 marks out of your 100. Part B is asking you to show the suspense account, so that's 10 marks going there. So that's an older question, 2004. There's less marks going for it in more recent questions. There's like 6 marks going for it. And then you have a theory question. You've no theory question here. So the later exams, the older exams, are the easier they were to get marks. Okay, so show the suspense account. So we go and we look for the suspense figures in our part A. So you'll see there in part 1 we had suspense debit 4,850. In part 3 we have suspense of €6 on the debit side, and in part 5 we have 8,600 on the credit side of the suspense account. So we simply just throw them figures in, and what we want to do is write down which error they came from and what the error, just write a little detail there. What was the error that you fixed there? Okay, that related to the suspense. So part 1 you have fixtures and fittings or creditor 4,850, and number 2 was purchases and that was €6, and then part 5 purchases and creditor €8,600. Okay, so what we want to do now is look and see which is the bigger side. Okay, and we can see quite clearly there our credit side is the biggest side, 8,600. We enter the largest amount on both sides, so 8,600 and 8,600. The credit side equals 8,600, but the debit side does not. Okay, so debit side is only 4,856. So what we have to do is we have to put in the difference, and we're going to call that the original difference, €3,744. Okay, so that is your suspense account complete, okay, for your 10 marks. But just to show you, when we're doing our balance sheet, it's going to affect our stock here that's in our current assets. So you can see here in the balance sheet it says stock including suspense 88,600. So your stock account would look like this. The 88,600 is your balance brought down. So you obviously have balance carried down here, 88,600. But your suspense is 3,744. So therefore your stock must have been €84,856 before your suspense went into it. So when we're doing our balance sheet, you'll notice that we're going to take that 3,744 away from the stock in the balance sheet. Okay, part C then says prepare a statement showing the corrected net profit for 15 marks. All right, so here we're going to look for all of the items that affect the trading profit and loss. So I've highlighted them in green here. So in the first one, purchases affects the trading profit and loss, and no other one in there. In number 2, we've got discount affects our trading profit and loss, as does bad debts. In part 3, our sales returns affects our profit and loss, as does our purchases there. And then part 4, we have discount, €100 here on the debit side, and then we have in part 5, we've got purchases, €280 there on the debit side as well. So in the balance sheet, we see the net profit figure there in the finance buy section is €63,300. But as you know, this balance sheet is completely incorrect. And you see from part A that we have items that will affect our trading profit and loss. So remember, our expenses and revenues are the items that we're looking for. Now, you'll see here that everything on the debit side will therefore decrease the net profit figure because expenses go on the debit side, but so do revenues that decrease. So both of them are going to decrease the net profit figure. All right, and likewise then the opposite, we have everything on the credit side are revenues or they are expenses reducing. So therefore that would increase our net profit figure. So in part C here, we have statement of corrected net profit. So the original net profit, 63,300. We're going to add items on the credit side here, and we're going to take away items on the debit side here because they are going to increase the net profit figure and reduce the net profit figure. Okay, so we'll start off at number 1. We have purchases on the debit side, so that's going to reduce my net profit figure, 16,500. Number 2, we have 50,000 on the credit side, so that is going to increase my net profit figure. Also in number 2, we have bad debts. It's going to reduce the net profit figure, €800 there. Number 3, we have sales returns are going to reduce the net profit figure, €340. On the credit side, we have purchases that is going to increase the net profit figure. Number 4, we have discount on the debit side there, that is going to reduce the net profit figure. And number 5, on the debit side there, we have €280, which is also going to reduce the net profit figure. So overall, statement of corrected net profit, 63,300 plus 50 plus 40 is €63,390. And then we're going to minus all the items on the debit side. So 16,500 minus 800 minus 340 minus 100 minus 280 is our corrected net profit of €45,370. So that is actually the correct net profit figure there. Now, last thing that we have to do in this question, so again, this question doesn't have a theory, which is strange because other questions more recently always have theory. So 20 marks for the balance sheet. So what do we have to do? The remaining items must be balance sheet entries. So you'll see I have them highlighted in blue here. So I have creditors and I have fixtures and fittings. I have bank, debtor and debtor here. In number 3, I have debtor, I have fixtures and fittings, I have drawings then, I have debtor, and I have creditor there. So you'll see all of those items are balance sheet items, okay? And how will I know the balance sheet items? Well, think about, go back to the balance sheet, okay? So you'll see here, there's all your balance sheet items here, okay? So just in case you're confused, go and look at that for that. Now, as you know from your alert, assets on the debit side increase, so assets increase on the debit side. And then the opposite, assets decrease on the credit side. Your alert diagram is telling you that liabilities increase on the credit side, so liability plus, and then liabilities decrease on the debit side, so liability minus on the debit side. Okay, so what we do in part D for the balance sheet, we are going to enter all of the figures from the balance sheet that we've been given here, but we're going to look at, you can see that we've done that there, so 650 up in the premises, fixtures and fittings 72, etc. The only difference is here in the stock and the net profit. We fixed the stock. We want to fix the stock from the suspense account. Remember, we said we were going to minus the original difference, which was 3,744 away from the stock. And the net profit figure is the new figure, €45,370 here. And you got that from part C. Now, what we're going to do now is have a look at our part A, and we're going to look at all of the changes that we need to make in the balance sheet and make them as we're going along. So I would start at the start, okay, and I would do, okay, creditor first. It's on the credit side. Creditor is a liability, and as our liabilities increase on the credit side, so plus 23,000 there. Next, we have fixtures and fittings, 1650. Fixtures and fittings is an asset, okay, and it is on the debit side. Assets increase on the debit side, so plus 1650 there. Bank is usually an asset, all right, but in this case, in this question, you see that the bank is a liability because it is a bank overdraft. So liabilities increase on the credit side, so the overdraft is increasing there by €750. Our asset debtor is increasing here on the debit side, but then it is decreasing on the credit side. So our asset debtor plus 800 and minus 800. That is number 2 completed. Moving on then to number 3 for our assets and liabilities. The first one that we have here is debtor, 340 on the credit side. Debtor is an asset, and assets decrease on the credit side, so minus €340. The fixtures and fittings account is an asset account. Assets increase on the debit side, so €34 plus to fixtures and fittings. Number 4, we have drawings, 1,600. So drawings is down in the finance by, we take it away from the net profit figure. So drawings, 1600, we are plussing that to our drawings in our finance by section. That is number 4 drawings done. So we actually have another one here in part 4, debtor, credit side, 1,700. So what we need to do is look down. Our asset debtor decreases on the credit side, so minus 1,700 there. Number 5, then we have creditor on the debit side. So a creditor is a liability, okay? So liabilities decrease on the debit side. So creditor, we are going to minus 8320 from our creditor here. So that is everything entered. All you have to do then is tot everything up. Okay, so you can pause the video whenever you need to there. So your total net assets, €745,770. And then your capital employed when you tot everything up should also be €745,770.